Welcome to Let's Talk About It. Here we go! Say yeah! Woohoo! Oh, that's a great line. That is a great line.
Almost fucking kill me! You're welcome!
Hey guys, welcome back to our Let's Talk About series, where we talk about everything going on in the movie world, TV world, video game world, basically everything in the entertainment world. This is the show where I discuss topics I want to talk about that's going on, in the industry, in the world of what I just said, movies, TVs, video games. And if you guys have any, topics you ever want me to talk about, please make sure you put it down in the comments below, and, or email me saying like, hey, I really would love to talk about this. I really want you to talk about this topic, talk about this story, because these stories, I'm going around to all the major trades, just picking out stories that I find interesting that I think you guys would want to talk about. And so, that's what this show's about. So, sit back, grab your drink, grab your food, and enjoy this video. So let's jump into our first topic here. And that topic is this. Now, we can all admit that I think a lot of people can say, Thor Love and Thunder was not the Thor movie we thought it was going to be, Thor Love and Thunder was based off one of the great, comic book stories in Thor comics. It's a very, very interesting Thor comic story. But, when I watched it, I kind of think it missed the ball. The thing is, a lot of people didn't like it because of the comedy. And, we knew, also, like, this was Chris Hemsworth's fourth time playing Thor, and Taika Waititi coming back. We thought this movie was going to be great. Well, according to Deadline, it says Chris Hemsworth regrets about Thor. I became a parody of myself, and I was thinking of like maybe not reporting on this because I really don't like to report on stuff that's like that's kind of like about the actors saying like, oh, I regret what I did, but this is really interesting to me because Chris Hemsworth, he's been Thor almost since I've been alive. I was in middle school, when I think 5th grade, when the first Thor movie came out. So I was still like a little tiny kid when this came out. But, he goes on to say, this is the quote he says, I got caught up in the improv and whackness and became a parody of myself. And I think, the thing with Thor, what Taika Waititi was trying to do, I think he was trying to make a Thor, that, would make you laugh. Because, Chris Hemsworth, he is a very, very funny actor. Very, very funny man. If you watch him in the Ghostbusters 2016, he's very hilarious. And, I think they're trying to go for a more comedy aspect with the Thor character. And I think it worked well for Ragnarok because you had a good mix of the action and the comedy. Because when Thor Love and Thunder, it felt like it was all comedy. It felt like more like it was supposed to be like a superhero rom-com between Jane and Thor. And, also with it, it didn't really get me in the feels when Jane died because, I was like, oh, I never really liked the Jane and Thor romance, but, the movie happened and it still made about almost $700 million at the box office, which is quite still impressive for a Marvel movie, but this was like kind of when people were still going to see Marvel movies, but the decline was starting. And, I think Chris Hemsworth, he might want to get back to that more serious take, because, Chris Hemsworth is getting older, I think a year ago, he announced he was taking a little step back from acting, and I think he wants to really take roles, that he loves, I think Thor he really loves, but, all the press he's been doing for Furiosa, saying, it's been a dream of mine to be in a George Miller movie, and, just the appreciation he has for the Mad Max saga, and George Miller, was like, okay, I can see why you wanted to do this movie, because George Miller is an Australian director, one of the most iconic Australian directors of all time, and, of course, if you grew up in Australia, especially if I grew up here, if I was an actor, my dream would be to work with Martin Scorsese, Steven Spielberg, and, if you're Australia, you're like Mad Max, that's probably the huge thing, and, it's so good to see his appreciation for it. And, I'm not saying I want George Miller to now go do a Thor movie, I'm just saying, I think if they are going to do Thor 5, I think they should take a more serious turn with it, For me personally, I would love to see, you know, it go back to like what the first Thor movie was like. There's some funny stuff in there, but it was more seriousness and it was epic, like mythical action. And that's what I think what made like Thor like so different, where you had Captain America, who was kind of like more the soldier, you know, it was like more of a war story, Captain America. Iron Man was more about a like redemption story, a guy whose tech falls into the wrong hands, realizing that he's not doing the wrong thing. And Thor's story was really, hey, he's this guy who thinks he's better than everyone else. You know, he's Thor. You know, he doesn't need to be. His goal is just to be Prince, a king of Asgard. And, you know, having that, what kind of Brana did with that first Thor movie, I think, is great. You know, I personally, Thor Ragnarok is my favorite movie. I love that movie. But Thor 1 is my second favorite Thor movie. And, you know, I think, you know, it would be awesome if Kenneth Branagh came back because, you know, Kenneth Branagh, great director, and I think he really captured what Thor was in that first movie. And, you know, I would love, you know, I'm not the biggest Thor geek, you know. I don't know a whole lot. I know stuff, like, I've read Thor comics before, you know, but one of the things I've really, really wanted the character to go in is, what if you went the Donald Blake route, you know? What if, you know, for our 5th movie, we get a Thor, you know, who, kind of what he did in the first one, and go back to the roots of, like, okay, we have this Thor who saved the world numerous times over and over. He has his daughter now, and, like, go back to, like, maybe do a buddy cop movie with his daughter. I don't know. All I'm saying is, you know, I think it would be really cool to also introduce his other half-sister, Angela. You know, I'm a big Angela fan. I think she's a really, really cool character. Angela originally wasn't a Marvel character. She was from the Spawn universe, but then Marvel got her to be in like that Thor universe. You know, there's a lot of ways they can go, and I think, you know, if they do another Thor movie, that will probably be the last Thor movie they do. My personal thing is, I think in Secret Wars, you know, they are going to kill Thor off, because, like, if you have not read the Secret Wars comic, new Secret Wars, there's like this army of Thors that works under Doctor Doom, which is really cool to see, and that's how like Jane Foster gets put in there again, and you have like this like Thor who's like kind of new but also not new. But, you know, I think Chris Hemsworth wants to start doing more serious roles, you know, because I think, you know, I love the Extraction movies. I think those are awesome movies, and, you know, I think, you know, he's a very comedic actor, but I think, like, he's only going to be doing acting for a little bit longer, because you know about everyone knows about his condition now, and I think he wants to spend more time with his family, and I think, like, he's not going to be as prevalent acting anymore, which I think is great, you know. I think Chris Hemsworth is one of the things that makes the MCU still worth watching. You know, we don't have Captain America, we don't have Tony Stark, but we have Thor, we have Chris Hemsworth, and everybody I've never seen anyone say anything bad about Chris Hemsworth. You know, how he's the most kindest, you know, guy that people have worked with. But what do you guys think about this story? Do you think they'll do another Thor, and do you think Chris Hemsworth will want to come back and play the character again? Please leave in the comments down below. Let's move on to our next topic here. And that is this. Now, I've had a very interesting relationship with the Scooby-Doo franchise. You know, of course, when I was a kid, I watched the like animated 2005 Scooby-Doo show. Was like, Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you? We gotta solve that mystery. Scooby-Dooby-Doo, you know, if you guys know that series, like, that was, like, when I was really first introduced to Scooby-Doo. And then, you know, we had the live-action movies. And, you know, as a kid, you know, I loved watching those movies, you know. I'll admit, like, as a kid, you know, I was very scared of stupid things, you know. I was scared of Harry Potter, you know, very scared, you know. And I was scared of the second Scooby-Doo movie. The goo black monster always creeped me out because, you know, I was terrified of Venom when I was a kid. But, you know, Scooby-Doo they've been trying to get Scooby-Doo relaunched again. They tried to do a Scooby-Doo animated movie, you know, like I think a couple years ago. Didn't really do well at the box office. Came out during the pandemic. No one really saw it. And had, like, mixed reviews. And now they got the Velma series, which people just, like, hate watch, apparently. That's why they're in season 2. But people watch it. And now, according to Deadline, we got some more news on Scooby-Doo. According to Deadline, Scooby-Doo live-action series from Berlanti Productions lands at Netflix with major commitment. Now, of course, I was like, oh, live action Netflix series. But then I see Berlanti Productions. Now, I see Berlanti because that name is very familiar to me. Berlanti, Greg Berlanti was one of the guys who did the Arrowverse for the CW. So I'm like, okay. And, he hasn't really hit. Like, those shows were hit and miss most of the time, You had the great shows like Arrow, Supergirl, and The Flash, great shows when they started. And then you had Legends of Tomorrow, which had a really good first and second season. Then once after that, they kind of went, oh, they're not superheroes, they're just time travelers. I'm like, okay. And then things went downhill after that. And, it's worried. I'm like, okay, this is what Greg Berlanti, is he going to do like what he did to CW? Like, just, like, take people, who are CW-ish and cast them in the Netflix show. Because, like, I'm not the hugest fan of Scooby-Doo, I've kind of grown out of the franchise as I've gotten older, It's more of, like, my opinion, a kid's franchise. But, the thing about Scooby-Doo is, you can introduce a whole new generation to this Scooby-Doo, there hasn't really been, anything, like, for this new generation to get in love with Scooby-Doo. You had the Scoob movie, but that was one movie and nobody saw it. So this is a chance for Netflix to, like, okay, here are these new characters. Here is Fred, Velma, Shaggy, Daphne, and you can do some interesting things, with the characters. Now, I'm not going to go fan cast. I'm not going to go fan cast because, I don't have ideas of the people playing these characters. Like, personally, I think they're going to take the approach of getting unknowns for the roles. Like, they're not going to go get super popular characters, I think they're hoping, like, the IP of Scooby-Doo is going to attract people, but I think they're going to kind of, not get well-known actors, to play these roles. And, of course, Berlanti Productions Berlanti Productions is just the Dead Boy Detectives, which I don't know how good that is. It's in the top 10. I'm not really interested in it because it didn't really look. I wasn't really interested in watching that show, but I'm hoping that this show can be good when they announce. And I hope when they announce the cast, it's a cast we can all get behind, which probably won't happen because, everyone has their own opinion about everything. But what do you guys think? Are you guys excited for a new Scooby-Doo live action series? Please tell me your thoughts down below in the comments. Now let's move on to this next topic here. Now, we reported on this happening kind of, I believe 3 to 4 months ago. We were told that, Olivia Wilde and Margot Robbie are trying to get an Avengelyne movie come out. And I kind of say, like, I didn't know much about the character. So I read into the character, and it sounded really interesting, She's like, I believe that what I remember talking about is that she is an angel that is who's kind of banished from heaven, kind of banished from there. And she was like the most feared warrior up there, and she's banished to live among humans. And she kind of comes down, and she kind of, like what it says, avenges, people. She fights demons, and she's trying to prevent Armageddon from happening. Very, very, very interesting idea. And the character is very interesting design, to say so. And the character was made by I believe it's creator Robbie Liefeld, who also created the Deadpool character, which we saw the name Liefeld in the Deadpool 3 trailer that just dropped. So really cool. And also, now according to Deadline, we got some more confirmation on it. According to Deadline, Avengelyne packaged to Warner Brothers with Margot Robbie, Olivia Wilde, Simon Kinberg, Poor Things Tony McInerney to adapt Deadpool creator Rob Liefeld's comic book. Now, it also says in the article that it's Margot Robbie's eyeing to play the titular character of Avengelyne. And, I'm super happy, Warner Brothers teaming up with Margot Robbie again to bring us this movie. And, people might feel like, oh, we're getting another superhero movie. Like, this, could be in the realms of superhero content like we've gotten with Invincible, with The Boys, because it's not from the big IP. It's not from DC, it's not from Marvel, This is kind of, really a dark horse comic character, which, I love it when we get, like, a superhero character that I know nothing about, the artist know nothing about. And, you know, reading the description of the character, reading, like, this is going to be, like, a rated R, you know, angels, demons, superhero movie, like, that sounds awesome. And, you know, the Avengelyne character sounds like a total freaking badass. You know, I haven't read a comic. I'm kind of interested to reading this comic series, but, you know, you got Margot Robbie's Lucky Chaps involved, which they would have been on a hit. You know, they just had Barbie. I believe they also did Saltburn was with her company as well. But, you know, you also got Olivia Wilde in there. You know, I think Olivia Wilde might direct, which she made the fantastic comedy Booksmart. And then after that, she did the not-so-great movie, which I kind of like. Oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking on the name for you. It was... Guys, like, if you put in the comments, you know, what the movie is, I can't remember what it was. Oh, it was with Florence Pugh, Harry Styles, you know. And, you know, with that movie, there was a lot of controversy, not about the movie, but was with the stars of the movie, you know, with Harry Styles, with Olivia Wilde, and then, you know, the movie was not really critically liked. And then, now you also got Simon Kinberg involved. You know, Simon Kinberg, you know, he has worked in the superhero genre before. He has worked on basically all the Fox X-Men properties, you know, X-Men 1, X2, X3, and of course, he directed Dark Phoenix. You know, I think if you get Simon Kinberg to not direct, if you get him to maybe possibly write the script, you know, be the writer, because he has given us movies like X-Men, Days of Future Past, X2, you know, X-Men, you know, great additions to the X-Men franchise, you know. I think it could be really, really interesting. And, of course, you know, you got Tony McNamara. I don't know really who... I know Tony McNamara, he wrote the screenplay for Poor Things, which was an Oscar-nominated film. So you're getting talent. They didn't just go out and get random people like, oh, this is an untested writer. No, they're like, okay, let's go get talent. Let's go get people who have proven they can make great movies that people want to see. And, you know, personally, I'm very, very excited to see it, you know. And, of course, you know, Margot Robbie is being eyed for the role, which I don't have a problem for it, you know. Like, I'm somewhat of a Margot Robbie fan, you know. I warmed up to a lot more when I watched Barbie. I thought she was terrific as the Barbie character. But, you know, the thing, you know, that I'm worried is, like, there's a lot of people who have worked in comedy on this movie. And, you know, when I look at the character of Avengelyne, I don't really see a lot of comedy. I see kind of, you know, like a dark, rated R, supernatural movie. And, like, that's what I think would be really cool about this, you know? Because I think the one thing we haven't gotten from the superhero genre in a long time was a really, really awesome supernatural comic book movie. You know, I love the supernatural. You know, I loved Werewolf by Night. That was one of my favorite things. And, like, nobody watched it. That was the thing. Like, nobody watched Werewolf by Night. And now you also have James Gunn trying to go into supernatural with Swamp Thing, which I'm very excited about. And, you know, now Warner Bros. Is also trying to do another supernatural movie with Avengelyne. And, you know, I think this could be awesome. You know, you got, like, you know, you got a badass character, you know. Like I said, reading the description for it, seeing that they're like, okay, let's take this unknown comic book property, you know, that no one really knows, you know. And, you know, you're like, okay, like, what is this Avengelyne character? You have people who read, like, oh, what's this? Like, oh, like, personally, me reading this is like, this looks and sounds badass. You know, this seems like a super badass character that, you know, I think will really translate to the screen, you know. And I will say the character, you know, does, like, look like very, very 2000s with the way she dresses. You know, they're probably going to change some things about the wardrobe because, you know, I think, you know, the wardrobe is a bit revealing. You know, I think, like, okay, like, maybe you got to change some things a little bit. But, you know, I'm very excited for this. What do you guys think? Are you excited that they're actually going to be doing this Avengelyne movie with Warner Brothers? Please leave it down below, and let's move on to our final topic here. Now, the X-Men have been very front and stage recently. Very front and stage. And I'm so happy for my X-Men, you know. They're killing it with X-Men 97 right now. One of the best series, I believe, on that I've watched this year. And that's, like, up there, I believe, with Shogun. You know, I love Shogun. But I think X-Men 97 is up there with one of my favorite series this year. And they also got Deadpool and Wolverine coming out, which I think is going to just be phenomenal. With the trailers I've loved, I'm just hoping that, Sean Levy and Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman can hit it with this movie. And so the question has been, when are we going to get our new X-Men? The question is, who would be a good candidate to direct this X-Men? Because Bryan Singer, no matter if what you feel about some of the X-Men movies, he made one of my favorite X-Men movies of all time, X-Men Days of Future Past. So I think Bryan Singer did a great job with what he could do with the X-Men. Now, we also have another director who's working with Disney right now on the new Lion King movie, Barry Jenkins. And, comicbookmovie.com raised this question. X-Men, could Mufasa Director Barry Jenkins be a contender to Helm MCU reboot? And, I want to talk about this for a second because, we've talked about who we'd want to see as the X-Men. Who's going to play Scott Summers? Who's going to play Jean Grey? Who's going to play Wolverine, And, we never really talked who would be a good director for it. Now, I was really interested when they came out with this article because they're talking about Barry Jenkins, Barry Jenkins, an Oscar-winning director who directed Moonlight and now is taking his stab at Mufasa, which I reacted to the trailer. You can watch that on the channel, which I really thought the trailer was really strange. I think it was the greatest, just a little tease of the movie. And I'm wondering, okay, if Mufasa can hit, is it possible that Marvel's okay, Barry Jenkins will now have that experience working on a big studio project because he did Moonlight, but he's never really made a huge studio movie. So Lion King is going to be his first test. Mufasa the Lion King is going to be his first test. And what he's said about the film, it makes me very excited for it. Now I'm if he can hit with Lion King, I think he could possibly be a contender to be working on this X-Men project. You're not saying that those movies are similar, it's just I think Barry Jenkins, what he did with Moonlight, how he handled those characters, I would very much trust him to be able to handle the relationships of the X-Men characters. Now, as I've said before, you go watch my first video where I talked about X-Men, and it's I don't want an X-Men movie filled with 15 or 10 X-Men. I'm you got to make it simple. Okay. My thing is you go back to the beginning of X-Men. You start with 5 characters. Those 5 characters, in my opinion, Scott Summers, Cyclops, Jean Grey, Bobby Drake, Iceman, Beast, and Angel. You start with those 5 because I think going to this movie, you don't put Wolverine. My thing is listen, everyone loves Wolverine, and we're about to get him in Deadpool Wolverine. Deadpool and Wolverine with Hugh Jackman. It's you need to take a little step back with some breathing room and not have Wolverine. Introduce. My favorite answer is this time, as a fan, I want them to make Scott Summers the man. I want Scott Summers to make them the leader he is, like we see in X-Men 97 and the comics, because in truth, everyone else in the world thinks Wolverine is the leader of the X-Men, when really, he has led the X-Men. He's led divisions of the X-Men before, but he's never been the leader of the X-Men. He's always kind of been, the guy who's kind of with the X-Men. He's kind of with the Avengers, with Alpha Flight. He's kind of always there, but he's never been a leader. And they've always, that's the one thing I've not liked about the X-Men Fox movies. They push Cyclops to the side every time, I was really hoping when they had Ty Sheridan playing Cyclops, which I love Ty Sheridan as an actor, that he would become the Cyclops, the leader of the X-Men. But no, they pushed Cyclops again to the side and made Mystique, who, in my opinion, has never really been an X-Men. She's always been on the Brotherhood Immune side. It's oh no, Jennifer Lawrence, she's the big name actor. She has to be the leader. I'm okay, you got to make this X-Men movie because people love X-Men 97 and they're loving Scott Summers because we're finally getting the Scott Summers we see. And, I'm very excited to see what Barry Jenkins, if he is directing, could do with all these characters. And, they go on into this article talking about how a writer could be announced pretty soon. Because we did talk about, almost 6 to 7 months ago, that they are looking at writers for the movie. And I think they're going to announce a writer very soon. I would say summer. But, it's going to be a while since we get confirmation of this movie. And people have asked on Twitter, Barry Jenkins, are you thinking about doing a comic book movie? And he's I don't know. Maybe if they look at me, I will do it. And, you know, I think he'd be a perfect director. You know, I think, you know, he would do a great job with X-Men, you know. And I'm not just saying that because he's, you know, an Oscar nominated. Like, I'm saying that because he has won an Oscar, which proves that he is a great director. But the thing that's really going to show if he can handle a big studio project is with this Mufasa movie. If he can hit, like, I would say if Mufasa makes 500 million plus, that I would trust him to handle an X-Men movie. And, you know, we're not going to get this for a couple years, so I'm not expecting them to announce next week or next month, like, Barry Jenkins, director of X-Men. I'm like, no. I think they won't announce anything new of X-Men until we get to the end of Secret Wars. But what do you guys think? Would you guys be interested in seeing Barry Jenkins, Helm, and X-Men Reboot? Or you're like, no, I have someone else in mind. Please leave your comments down below. And that's me, guys, for this video. Please leave any comments down below if there's anything you ever want me to talk about on this video. If you want to talk about on the show, you know, if there's anything you ever want me to talk about, you know, anything like, hey, cover this story. I'm like, okay, I'll look into it, see if I read into it, see if it's worth covering, and then I'll talk about it. Well, guys, please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you next time. Peace.